Welcome to Voyage Daily Tech, the most important news personalized for you every day, supported by Voyage.com.
After listening to today's news, you'll know first, SpaceX's plan for 1 million orbital data center satellites to power AI disrupts the global compute race. We'll analyze why this private US control of AI compute is a turning point and how it could affect Europe's and China's sovereign AI strategies. Second, international stocks beat the US by 15%, driven by South Korea's 125% surge from the global memory chip boom. So we'll discuss why this supply chain shift matters and what it means for tech giants like Apple facing critical chip shortages. Third, York Space Systems goes public, targeting the $831 billion Golden Dome missile defense project and disrupting traditional defense contracting. We'll explore how its holistic solution model could transform defense procurement while tackling the immense engineering challenge of integrating legacy military systems. Fourth, 15% of UK online food retailers are now dark kitchens using predictive analytics while operating in a regulatory blind spot. So we'll discuss why this trend matters and what it means for consumer safety with the rise of untracked virtual brands and allergen risks. Fifth, Microsoft's ban of Jeffrey Epstein from Xbox reveals a year-long enforcement lag and the complex reality of platform safety operations. In this episode, we'll break down this case and what it signals about the debate between platform safety and digital exile for online ecosystems. The story begins with a decision that caught everyone by surprise. Elon Musk's SpaceX has just filed an application to launch 1 million satellites into Earth's orbit. The goal? To create massive orbital data centers to power artificial intelligence. So what does an orbital data center actually entail? The plan involves creating long tethered chains of computing nodes in space. Each node would have its own solar panels for continuous power and use the vacuum of space itself for cooling through a process called radiative cooling. The data would then be zipped between these satellites and back down to Earth using high-speed laser links, with NASA already proving this is possible at speeds of 200 gigabits per second. The company claims the explosive growth of AI is already outpacing our terrestrial capabilities and that moving data centers to space is the most cost and energy efficient solution. A while back, we contrasted SpaceX's hard physical infrastructure with OpenAI's software-first model and asked where investors would place their bets. This proposal effectively reframes SpaceX as an AI compute provider, not just a launch and connectivity company, exactly the kind of story analysts said could be a powerful catalyst for the entire space sector if it ever pursues a listing. Now, the environmental trade-offs here are incredibly complex. On Earth, data centers are projected to consume nearly 945 terawatt hours of electricity by 2030, and their water usage is staggering. For example, Microsoft's AI workloads alone cause its water consumption to surge by 34% in 1 year, using nearly 1.7 billion gallons. The orbital plan avoids that, but it introduces its own environmental costs. Each rocket launch can emit between 200 and 300 metric tons of carbon dioxide, not to mention other pollutants. So the debate over which is truly greener is far from settled. To understand the sheer scale of this plan, you have to know that SpaceX already operates nearly 10,000 satellites for its Starlink network. That system has already been accused of creating serious congestion in space, a claim Musk denies. This new plan would increase that number 100-fold. This is where the situation takes a more complex turn, moving from a technical challenge to a geopolitical one. A privately owned US-based company controlling the world's AI computing layer directly challenges the sovereign AI strategies of other global powers. A while back, we broke down how US defense priorities are tilting towards space, the Pentagon's proposed Golden Dome missile defense concept, and how China's latest 5-year plan explicitly targets leadership in satellite networks. We've already seen Starlink become essential for Ukraine's defense, and SpaceX runs a separate military-focused program called Starshield, which signed a $1.8 billion contract to build a spy satellite network for a US intelligence agency. Layering orbital AI on top of that would deepen the entanglement between commercial platforms and national security, intensifying the sovereignty debate on all sides. In response, China is already building its own 13,000 satellite constellation called Guowang, and the European Union is pushing its own sovereign AI cloud to maintain digital independence. We are watching the race for digital control go into orbit, and the ambition goes even deeper. The application states this is the first step towards humanity becoming a Kardashev two-level civilization, a term from the 1960s for a hypothetical society that can harness the entire power of its star. Now, get this. Using grand sci-fi concepts like the Kardashev scale is a powerful narrative strategy. It reframes a commercial venture as a crucial step for human civilization's destiny. This helps attract investors and puts pressure on regulators by making the project seem like a historic imperative, not just another business plan. Continuing our last discussion about market catalysts, it's also the kind of framing that could headline a future SpaceX listing while setting up a hard question we raised before. If it ever goes public, how would it balance quarterly shareholder demands with its long horizon role in US national security? This sci-fi vision is colliding with some serious real-world warnings. Experts caution that a growing number of low-orbit craft increases the possibility of crashes, which could damage hardware or send materials falling back to Earth. And that potential for cascading collisions, known as the Kessler syndrome, is a very real risk. Right now, there are over 11,800 active satellites in orbit, and the European Space Agency estimates there are over 1 million pieces of debris larger than a centimetre already up there. The conflict is already here. Astronomers complained in 2024 that radio waves from the existing Starlink network were blinding their telescopes and hindering research. Musk has pushed back on these concerns, writing on his social media site X that the satellites will be so far apart that it will be hard to see from one to another, adding, "Space is so vast as to be beyond comprehension." But to put that vastness into perspective, SpaceX's own data shows its existing Starlink satellites had to perform over 25,000 collision avoidance maneuvers in just a 6-month period between late 2022 and mid-2023. That number shows just how crowded low Earth orbit already is, and we're talking about multiplying that density 100 times over. The proposal claims the system could deliver the computer capacity required to serve billions of users globally. If approved, it would represent a monumental leap in space infrastructure, while intensifying the global debate over the risks and rewards of commercializing low Earth orbit. And as we noted a while back, moves of this scale could either pour rocket fuel on space tech and AI, or if investors lose discipline, inflate the speculative bubble we've been warning about. We were just talking about a single American company aiming for global dominance in space and AI, but on the ground, the financial landscape is telling a very different story about American dominance. For an entire decade, US stocks absolutely trounced the rest of the world, but the game has just been flipped on its head. After underperforming US markets by a staggering 60% over the last 10 years, a major shift is underway. In just the last 14 months, international stocks have roared back, beating the US by roughly 15%. Believe it or not, this isn't a small correction, it's a massive inflection point. According to one expert, the era of US market dominance choked off a lot of international investing. The result? While overseas markets make up 30 to 40% of global market capitalization, most US investors have only 12 to 15% of their money there. This structural underweight is now a huge tailwind for global markets, and the numbers are explosive. The iShares ETF for Peru is up almost 118% in the last year. Brazil, a commodity powerhouse, is up nearly 49%. What's interesting is that the old investment category of emerging markets is becoming obsolete. Lumping a commodity-rich country like Brazil together with a tech-centric nation like South Korea hides the real story. We are seeing a fundamental split between economies driven by natural resources and a new class of tech emergent nations that are now central to global innovation. As we discussed a while back, that tech emergent cohort also includes design-heavy India, which is shifting from brainpower to factories via the OSAT ONI ramp, right alongside manufacturing powerhouses like South Korea. And the story gets even more specific, linking directly to the device in your pocket. South Korea's market is up an incredible 125%, driven by memory chip giants like Samsung and SK Hynix. The global semiconductor supply chain is incredibly concentrated. A recent study found that roughly 75% of all semiconductor manufacturing is located in China and East Asia. This gives a handful of non-US companies immense strategic control over the building blocks of our entire digital world. They are the new gatekeepers of technology. A while back, we dug into India's strategy to loosen that concentration, the OSAT gambit, Micron's multi-billion-dollar facility, and the broader China Plus One shift. The latest development isn't that India suddenly owns the fabs. It's that this diversification push is now intersecting with markets in real time, redirecting capital, talent, and policy incentives across Asia. So the memory chip market is, in the words of one portfolio manager, on fire. This isn't just market chatter. Apple just went on the record saying it can't secure enough chips to meet iPhone demand, a massive signal supporting the strength of this global trade. Continuing our last discussion, India already captures a big slice of high-margin chip design, roughly 1/105th of the world's semiconductor engineers, but the fabrication choke point still sits in East Asia. That's why shortages immediately re-rate Korea's memory leaders today, while India's build-out is starting with assembly, test, and packaging as a smart way to get in the game. It's not just tech. From European banks and industrials to Latin American commodities, fundamentals are improving in places that were stagnant for years. A weakening dollar and surging metals like silver, which is up roughly 200% in a year, are adding fuel to the fire. Actually, that weakening dollar is part of a much larger geopolitical repositioning. The reason this is all connected is that global central banks are actively diversifying away from the US dollar. According to the World Gold Council, central banks have been buying over 1,000 tons of gold every single year since 2022. They are deliberately shifting their reserves toward assets that are free from the political influence of any single nation. The world is repositioning. Capital and trade are becoming multi-directional. This all points to a new reality for investors. These are global trades, not just US trades, and they now span Korea's memory upcycle, Brazil and Peru's commodity resurgence, and India's design to OSAT climb that's reshaping the semiconductor map. Speaking of the intersection between technology, global competition, and national strategy, a newly public space company is making some very bold moves. York Space Systems debuted on the New York Stock Exchange with a valuation of nearly $5 billion, and its CEO is immediately making a play for a piece of an $831 billion government project. CEO Dirk Wallinger is directly tying his firm's future to President Trump's Golden Dome missile defense system. A while back, we talked about how China's latest 5-year plan explicitly aims to make it a major space power, especially in satellite networks, challenging US dominance. Today's move by York sits squarely in that broader contest. Washington's answer is a space-heavy shield, and York wants to be the glue that makes it work. The Golden Dome is being compared to the Reagan-era Star Wars program, and it could fundamentally change global security. For decades, peace has been kept by a doctrine called mutual assured destruction, or MAD. It's the simple, terrifying idea that if one country launches a nuclear attack, the other will launch one back and everyone loses. But if one country has a perfect shield, it might be tempted to strike first without fear of retaliation, and that could trigger a new high-tech arms race. We previously analysed how the space domain is becoming the front line of that race. Today's development shows how fast the defence side of the market is aligning to it, and the numbers here are staggering. While the project was announced with a $175 billion price tag, a report from the Congressional Budget Office estimates the total cost could soar to $831 billion. By tying his company so closely to a single politically charged project, Wallinger is taking a huge gamble. Defense projects this closely associated with one administration are vulnerable. History is filled with examples, like the FutureGen Energy Project or the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, which were cancelled when political winds shifted, costing billions. So what's behind his confidence to make this claim on day one? He says the entire point of the Golden Dome is to make separate systems that were never designed to work together, talk to one another. And in his own words, that is what we do. The challenge is immense. You have York's brand new low Earth orbit satellites trying to communicate with decades-old Air Force, Navy, and Army hardware. It's like trying to run the latest app on a 20-year-old computer. The military has a name for this goal, JADC2, or Joint All-Domain Command and Control, but it's notoriously difficult. In recent tests, Navy and Army systems couldn't even fully exchange messages because of software incompatibilities. Past attempts at this kind of massive integration, like the Army's future combat systems, were cancelled after billions were spent, precisely because these technical hurdles were too high. this isn't just talk. York has already built and launched 21 low Earth orbit satellites for the US Space Development Agency as part of a mission last year. The company is framing itself as a proven partner. This all comes as the entire space technology sector is heating up, with the highly anticipated IPO from SpaceX expected to lift the whole industry. As we noted a while back, investors see a SpaceX listing as a powerful catalyst that could validate space tech as a mainstream asset class and potentially trigger a wave of acquisitions as fresh capital chases strategic positions. And he's likely right. The commercial space industry is projected to become a $1 trillion market by 2032. SpaceX alone is reportedly targeting a valuation of around $1.5 trillion for its IPO, which could be the largest in history. We previously discussed reports that pegged SpaceX closer to an $800 billion valuation. The latest chatter pushing that to $1.5 trillion underscores just how quickly sentiment is accelerating. This massive influx of cash is fueling incredible innovation, but it also has investors wondering if we're seeing a sustainable trend or a speculative bubble, similar to the dot-com boom, something we cautioned about when we talked through how a catalyst like SpaceX could inflate less mature companies. For years, York was viewed as a spacecraft manufacturer, but the company is now sending a clear message that it has a far greater ambition. As its CEO stated, York is a complete holistic solution, and that kind of turnkey capability is exactly what national defense needs. This holistic solution model is a radical departure from the old way of doing things. Traditionally, giants like Lockheed Martin or Northrop Grumman would build one specific part of a larger system. But newer companies like York are offering an all-in-one package. They design the satellite, build it, help launch it, and even operate it. They use standardized platforms to build satellites at high speed and roughly half the cost. This agility is exactly what the Pentagon is looking for to stay ahead, but it also introduces new risks, relying on commercial companies for critical national security functions. It's a massive strategic shift, and York just put itself right at the center of it. And as we've been saying, right at the center of a global space race, that's quickly moving from science fiction to the balance of power. We've been talking about technology reshaping huge trillion-dollar industries like national defense and global finance, but that same disruptive force is also quietly transforming something much more personal, how we get our dinner. The next time you order from Deliveroo or Just Eat, there's a 1 in 7 chance your food isn't coming from a real restaurant. It's coming from a dark kitchen, a hidden delivery-only operation with no storefront, no sign, and no customers walking in. A new university study just revealed that a full 15% of all online food retailers in England are now these ghost kitchens. Behind the scenes, these kitchens aren't just randomly placed. Delivery platforms are using powerful predictive analytics, what some call algorithmic urbanism. They analyze our collective spending habits, search histories, and location data to pinpoint exactly where the demand for a certain type of food is highest. Think of it like a heat map for hunger. These companies can forecast demand with 80 to 90% accuracy, allowing them to place a kitchen in the perfect, most profitable spot, often in cheaper industrial zones. The situation presents a fascinating duality. On one side, these businesses have massive commercial advantages like lower operating costs, but on the other, they are incredibly difficult for regulators to track. The rules we have were written for traditional restaurants you can see and walk into. Dark kitchen operators are exploiting these gaps. For example, in the US, Travis Kalanick's company, Cloud Kitchens, has faced lawsuits for allegedly misrepresenting where the food comes from, creating a maze for both consumers and regulators. This creates a massive blind spot. Management zones designed to limit the number of takeaways around schools. Dark kitchens can completely bypass them, undermining efforts to create healthier food environments. As one lead investigator, Dr. Lucy Neild, put it, these businesses risk falling through the gap with potential consequences for public health, encouraging greater consumption of high-fat, salt, or sugar food, and that public health concern extends to the people working inside these kitchens. Interestingly enough, reports describe workers in tiny, windowless units, some as small as 200 square feet, with poor ventilation and extreme temperatures. Many are employed like gig workers, classified as independent contractors with limited access to benefits, all while being monitored by algorithms that track their every move to maximize speed. But that's not the whole picture. The research also highlights serious concerns around food safety and transparency. Multiple different restaurants can operate out of the same physical kitchen space. This is what the industry calls virtual brands, and it's a massive trend. Research shows that over 40% of independent restaurants now operate at least one virtual brand to maximize their visibility on apps. It got so out of hand, with some places listing identical menus under different names, that Uber Eats recently had to remove 5,000 virtual storefronts from its platform in North America alone. This means consumers, especially those with allergies, may have no way of knowing about shared preparation environments or the risk of potential allergen cross-contamination. The core of the problem is that when you have one kitchen making burgers, tacos, and a peanut-heavy Thai menu, the risk of what's called allergen cross-contact skyrockets. Shared cooking equipment, utensils, and storage spaces make it incredibly difficult to guarantee a meal is free from an allergen. Even with protocols like color-coded tools, the fast-paced, high-pressure environment makes mistakes more likely. Here's the kicker. Almost no one knows this is happening. A recent survey found only a quarter of people had even heard of dark kitchens, and just 9% knew they had used one. This booming hidden industry is rewriting the rules of food delivery, operating in the shadows of public health oversight and consumer awareness. That theme of a hidden world operating just beneath the surface of our daily apps brings us to our final story. It's about another kind of operational reality, one that major tech platforms prefer to keep out of sight. Newly released emails show Jeffrey Epstein received a notice from Microsoft stating he was permanently banned from Xbox Live for, quote, harassment, threats, and or abuse of other players. But on the very same day, a second email from Microsoft told a completely different story. That message revealed the real reason for the ban. Epstein was a registered sex offender, and Microsoft was among the companies that had agreed to purge such accounts from their systems. So what was really going on? This wasn't a simple case of in-game harassment. It was part of a major initiative called Operation Game Over, launched by New York State. Microsoft, along with other giants like Sony and Apple, had partnered with law enforcement to cross-reference the state's sex offender registry against their user databases. The goal was to identify and remove offenders who were required by law to register their email addresses and online aliases. We're talking about a massive data matching operation that ultimately led to over 3,500 offenders being kicked off these platforms. However, if you zoom out, you'll see another layer to this story. The timeline is a bombshell. Microsoft joined that initiative in April 2012. Epstein's own emails suggest he may not have even signed up for Xbox Live until October 2012, months later, and yet the ban didn't actually happen until December 2013. That means his account appears to have been active for over a year after Microsoft had already committed to the purge. This enforcement lag reveals the immense challenge these companies face. For a platform with hundreds of millions of users, finding one specific person isn't like looking for a needle in a haystack. It's like finding a specific grain of sand on a beach. A study by Trust Lab found that nearly half of all tech companies say that just scaling their safety operations to keep up with user growth is a major challenge. Enforcement isn't always proactive. It's often reactive, relying on manual reviews that create huge backlogs. So a year-long delay, while shocking, points to the operational reality of policing a digital nation. It's not clear if Epstein played Xbox himself. Other emails show him asking an assistant, do we have an Xbox 360 Connect? And later discussing buying an Xbox as a surprise birthday gift. Years later, in 2019, a message in his records simply reads, why is there a $25.24 charge on Xbox? The records paint a clear picture. On the same day, Microsoft cited two vastly different reasons for the ban, all while Epstein's account appears to have been active for more than a year after the company had already agreed to remove registered sex offenders from its platform. Ultimately, this story opens up a huge debate. Epstein was banned for his status as an offender, not necessarily for anything he did on Xbox Live. This raises a critical ethical question. Where is the line between ensuring community safety and creating a form of digital exile? In fact, the Supreme Court has even weighed in on this, ruling in one case that a state couldn't impose a blanket ban preventing sex offenders from using social media, calling it a violation of free speech. It forces us to ask if these platform-level bans are truly effective at protecting people, or if they are a form of security theatre, a public relations move that can be easily circumvented by creating a new account. This single case pulls back the curtain on the incredible complexity of trying to keep millions of people safe online.
That's it for today on Voyage Daily Tech. Follow, share, and stay tuned for daily updates coming your way tomorrow.